Hello, world. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying the conference. Thank you very much for having the stamina to obviously stick around past 5 p.m. to listen to me talk about something that I'm very passionate about, giving people more time in their life back, right? I mean, that seems like a pretty noble goal. I spent the last 20 years of my career in telecommunications, where my noble goal at that time was to connect people with the things that they love. The end result of that story is that one day, during the height of the pandemic, the telecommunications company that I spent a long time working for, we lost our entire contact center of a few hundred agents due to a positive screening of COVID at a BPO. So you can imagine we kind of woke up and went, wow, this is not so great for a consumer and business-facing telecommunications company providing, internet, telephony, and television. If people can't call you, it's not so great. And so we were really damaged by our reputation in terms of CSAT, in terms of not being able to service our customers. And so that was the impetus for us to dive into conversational AI. So we quickly threw together a prototype with Dialogflow ES, floated it in front of the CEO. Previously, he'd been a little bit apprehensive of bots. I think back then, we're talking about early 2020, the general consensus around bots was that they were not very good, across the board. So he didn't want to risk his business. But at this point, we had the compelling event to sort of unlock that initiative and get that out the door. So within a few months later, we had the prototype live. Within a year's time, we had actually reduced our incoming contact volume by over a third, right? So it wasn't, and I'm not talking about containment, I'm talking about preventing people from actually having to call us. And so how were we able to do that? Was by seeing why people had to call us in the first place and figure out, how are we going to prevent this, right? And so I guess I should put that slide on first. So again, background in telecom, switched into customer service and AI after that compelling event because I saw wow, there's something real here. This is actually transformational. There's real business value that can be derived here. And I'm not embarrassed to say this. I know a lot of people focus on containment. Containment for that bot was 5%, and I'm proud because overall in the end, we reduced contacts by 30% and reduced agent headcount by 50%. Right? So the business value was realized without needing to force people or to prevent people from actually reaching an agent. Now, so why are we doing this? Why are we building bots? What function do they play? I'm very much a big believer that nobody actually wants to contact your business. I mean, if you take the example of, an internet service provider, people don't go out there and say, hey, I want to buy internet. I mean, of course we do because we know that we need it, but what they're really saying is, hey, I want to watch Netflix. I want to, work from home. I want to do online gaming. I want to talk to my loved ones. But in order to do that, I need internet. And in order to, keep that, in order to buy, in order to acquire, in order to maintain it, there's some activities that I have to do. And if I'm not able to do that, well, I need help, right? So pick up the phone, give a call to customer service. And the reason I bring this out is, when we're building a bot, we're not building a bot in a vacuum. We're not building a bot for the sake of building a bot. We're building a bot to play a pivotal role in the customer service function, right? We want to make sure that we're improving it in some means. We don't want to throw a bot in only to make it worse. That's not really going to do anybody any favors. And of course, if you're aligned with my goal, my noble goal of giving people more time in their life back, you're not doing anybody any favors there. The other thing I'll throw on that goal is, if you focus more on contact prevention instead of contact deflection, the business still benefits, more so even, but so does the customer. Everybody wins. Loyalty is improved. And when we're talking about loyalty, if anyone here hasn't read The Effortless Experience by Matt Dixon, Nick Tommen, and Rick DeLisi, I highly recommend it. It is a book that is focused on contact center. But of course, in many cases, our bots are playing a pivotal role in the contact center. So understanding how to ensure that we're delivering the right experiences to drive loyalty is going to be effective. And I would say the major conclusion of the research from within that book is it's not delightful experiences, it's not wowing people that ultimately drives customer loyalty, it is the reduction of customer effort. So it falls in line with my happy, noble goal that I'm proud to continue to share with you today. So how do we measure that? How do we make sure that we are delivering quality customer experiences? How do we make sure that we are giving people time in their life back? And even more importantly, so if we want to keep our jobs, how do we justify that all the work that we put in is financially beneficial for the business, right? There's lots of things to measure, incredible amount of data sources. How do we avoid getting lost? How do we focus on what's important? So at VUX, when we build bots for customers, Everything is always inclusive of analytics. There's no way that we could put out a solution that we can't measure and show the value that we're delivering. And we break our analytics apart in 3 layers, right? I'm going to focus on the middle one first. I'm going to kind of go up and down. But so the middle one is, I think, the one we can all relate to is customer journeys. That term can be a little bit overloaded. In this case, it can mean the entire customer lifecycle journey. So from product research, buying, to sunset, or it could be an individual activity that someone's trying to accomplish. They were trying to buy, or they were trying to open a service ticket, or they wanted to make a package change or something like that. So what are they ultimately trying to do, and what was the outcome of that? If you work that upwards on the business side, there's a financial value to that. I mean, if someone needs to call and talk to an agent in order to check their balance, well, there's a cost per call. I'm going to take the old average of $15 a call at that point. So you could say that delivering the automation for that particular journey could be worth $15 every single time you've serviced a check balance. But I want to focus on that a little bit more because in many cases, as a bot, you have the capability of saving a lot of time and helping a lot of people, even if you're still going to transfer to an agent. So it's important not to just look at, there was an interaction with a bot and it was transferred to an agent, therefore, it didn't add value. I still needed to spend that $15, that cost per call. But the truth is, that cost per call, that's derived from an average metric across many different interactions. So we'll say, okay, but we all know, there's a big difference between obviously a 30-minute call and a 15-minute call. In one case, the agent was available for twice the amount of time there, right? So those journeys still need to be tracked and financially evaluated or quantified, even with transferring to an agent. I'm going to show a little bit about what that looks like later. And of course, on the lower level, we have the interactions. So how did they accomplish their journey? That could be everything. I know we're talking about interactions. Probably the first thing that pops everyone's heads here is obviously the conversational interface, whether it's a chat bot, whether it's a voice bot. But this is also inclusive of things like your traditional IVR. That's a surface area your customer is using to interact with you. Same with your web page. Every click, all of that. These are the things that your customer is doing to interact with your business to ultimately accomplish their journey. And if they fail on the first channel, they go to the next one, and they go to the next one until ultimately they've wound up with a person, and then everybody's unhappy because they've lost all this time in their life, and they've caused frustration, and that's obviously not what we want to do. Oops. Now, breaking that down a little bit further, at each of those tiers, so this is essentially the same thing, but broken down into a little bit more granular detail, you're seeing what I'm essentially saying. So at a business level, we're looking at things like how many active customers can I handle? What's my average revenue per user? What's my profit? What's my cost, right? These are the metrics of business. These are the things that ultimately, when we're talking with CFOs, when we're talking with executive stakeholders, this is how we're going to demonstrate value. And the value, again, might not even be cost reduced. Again, if contacts are still going to agents, additionally so, we're all in business. I think we could all agree, a business that's not growing is not necessarily a good thing. So what happens if you, automate 50% of your interactions and then you double your subscriber base? You haven't saved any cost on staff, but what you've done is you've actually doubled your capacity for active customers, and that has value. That is cost to serve as a ratio. At the journey level, fairly straightforward again. What are they trying to accomplish? A lot of this data is stuff that you can probably extrapolate from CRMs today and any kind of self-service portal, but what are they trying to accomplish? What was the effort behind it? What channels were used? All of that sort of good stuff. And then at the interaction layer, again, I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but now I have some pictures to go along with it, but we're talking about everything from website clicks to IVR DTMF pushes to emails to contact center interactions with a live person, interactions with a bot, which ultimately translate down at the bottom to what I've called a workflow event, which you could also look at as an automation event, which is what I was referring before as tracking automation events towards ROI KPIs. So how do we represent all of this? Like, how do we model all of this? And the reason I apologize, I'm a software engineer, I'm throwing UML diagrams in front of people, but the reason why I'm representing this and showing how to model this data is because, and I'm not claiming to have worked with every conversational AI platform, but I've worked with quite a few, and absolutely none of them have all of this modeled in it, right? But you absolutely need these abstractions in order to actually weave everything together. And so you're going to have to build these abstractions yourself. And you can with all of these platforms. It's just a lot of extra work. And to date, Kane and I always joke about what? I'm serious, I hope you are too, about writing a book together with all this stuff. But you can do this today. A lot of this is involved in basically setting context variables, keeping track of them, using webhooks. And let's take a look at that. But at the high level, what we're essentially saying is A journey is sort of the root of everything. What are they trying to do? A journey can happen across multiple channels. A journey can have multiple interactions, even multiple interactions on a single channel. I mean, they may have tried, to accomplish something one day, got stuck, tried again a couple hours later. That's still not great, right? And then on the conversational and interaction side, this is going to unlock quite a few KPIs for actually monitoring the performance of the interaction layer itself, breaking things down into sequences and turns. So you can think of sequences as sort of a goal or a micro goal of a conversation, and the turns as the individual steps within those conversations. And a turn, it might be conversational, it might even be just making an API call, tracking the results, and kind of seeing what's going on there. So how do we get all of this data out? Right? I mean, I'm saying that it's there today, we're capable of doing this today, but how, right? So, and by showing this, I know there's some vendor logos there. These are technologies that we use today. I'm not necessarily saying this is what you have to use to do these things, but it all starts, of course, with your NLU, right? Or your bot platform. I should say everything I'm talking here, I know like LLMs are all the rage right now. Everything that we're about to show is equally applicable, because at the end of the day, whether you're using an NLU-based system, whether you're using an LLM-based system, there are things you're trying to do, there are sequences, and there are steps to accomplish them. What you're using in between to sort of figure out what am I now learning from the last utterance and what are my next steps, that's cool. This thing's going to stand the test of time no matter what we swap out for that understanding and response layer. But the important piece here is that we build awareness into our systems. And there's a few ways of doing this. And in fact, the diagram that I did here is probably more representative of how I've built this with Watson than Dialogflow, because in some cases, there are systems where you need to manually export interaction logs, like IBM Watson as an example, through webhooks, or systems where you can have them automatically imported into a data store, like for example, Dialogflow CX. So, but essentially for the interaction layer, you're going to want to capture every single pass through a dialog node, and CX, we're talking about pages and flows, along with the annotations for sequences and turns. So these are things that have to be maintained in context variables. This does require you to design dialogue management in a little bit of a different way, because you have to know and keep track of, well, what goal am I trying to accomplish and what's the next step? And there are ways of organizing nodes to make that a lot easier. And then there's things like customer journey data. So how do I figure out what state my customer was in when they reached out and said, this is what I need help with, right? So in most cases, the bots are not living in isolation. They're connected to line of business systems. They're able to pull things from CRMs, from operational support and business support systems. That's your journey data right there, right? That can tell you, the lifetime of the customer, what products they have, what's the state of the product, is there an issue with the product, is something going on? And if we go back actually to some of this batch processing jobs, in many cases, you're going to have to write routines that maybe will run every day and scour 30, 40 different line of business systems looking for these problems, consolidating that into a single data source that's much more easily accessible to the bot, so that it can access everything in under 100 milliseconds to identify what's going on with the customer, and then pair it with the answer to, how may I help you? So, but all of that, of course, does require some software development skills. So we're relying on webhooks very heavily, of course, to tie all these systems in together, to collect the data, and then ultimately to push it into the analytics platform. In some cases, it's more than just that. Some of the systems that I've added here also are some handy tricks I'm hoping will be useful to some people to share, but in many cases, you're going to want to follow up on some of these interactions that you've had to ensure that you've actually delivered value. So for one of our recent deployments, so I guess it's earlier this year, it was a debt collector. We added this feature where, of course, a customer would call in, they wouldn't have a payment plan set up, and they would say, okay, how do I set up a payment plan? And of course, that's kind of just an FAQ. So we would look up the customer's account and make sure we understand what's going on. And then we would essentially send them a link to a form where they would go fill out an income and expenditure form, set up the payment plan, and that's fantastic. But how does the bot know that that's been done? Does the bot just sort of wash its hands clean and say, I responded to an FAQ, therefore I've helped someone? I mean, in most cases, yeah, that's how people are doing it. But there's a lot of great technologies in cloud, and that's why I know I put a bunch of Google Cloud services. But through leveraging Google Tasks, okay, let's create a follow-up 3 days later. Go back, check, is the payment arrangement now set up? Yes, okay, cool. Now we can say that we've taken that $24,000 debt and say that we've secured it properly and map that back to the financial metrics that actually mean something to the business, right? You're also going to need periodic jobs. When I talk about scouring your systems, looking at all the different systems, I think when for that internet service provider, we probably had, maybe 20 different systems just for internet, and equivalent numbers of systems that we would consult for, voice and television and all that stuff. A customer calls in and they're saying, oh, I have some kind of technical problem. There's no way live the bot is going to go hit 50 different systems and ask, what's going on. So you're going to absolutely want to have periodic batch jobs that can run slow, that can take 16 hours to run and scour all of your data sources and put that quick, easy summary data in a nice, clean data store that your bot can tap into and have that summary and complete that picture. And so, yeah, there's obviously a lot to do there. Like, there's a whole bunch of technology components. There's a lot of systems. There's a lot to do. It's a long-term effort. But, where do we begin, right? And there's some small steps that we can take for each of those layers that I'm going to kind of go through a little bit and show some examples. So I'll start top down. So for business, I've already touched upon it. Add some analytics to your automations. And I say automations, I'm referring, of course, to the bot calling a webhook and doing something like looking up an account, maybe doing some data protection checks, maybe, invoking some kind of action. I apologize. I lost my trail of thought there. Oh, yeah, apologies. But we want to track, obviously, the micro interactions as well. With customer journeys, we want to make sure to, for business analytics, these automations, these are things that you can, apologies about that, these are things that you can actually, this is what happens when you don't have presenter notes, by the way. These are things that you can build even without a bot. I mean, if you don't have a bot today and you just want to make a big dent in your customer service, I mean, if you have agents that are swivel chairing between 30 different systems, forget about the bot. Help your people. They're already not working very efficient if they have to access 30 different systems to get what they need done. And the best part is you can add those automation analytics at that time, right? So you write a tool that's essentially capturing data from 30 different systems and synthesizing and going, well, hey, this is a problem, right? Then you've saved a tremendous amount of time. So going back to that internet service provider example, we had a job that would run every day looking at all your services and it would come up with a health score. If you had bad DSL sync, if you had cable modems rebooting, if your VoIP device went out of service or your television was throwing error codes, we would be able to see that. But an agent receiving that from a customer, they're talking to a customer, then they have to go and log into all these systems. That's incredibly time consuming. It might take an agent 2 hours to check every possible system to look for all these issues. Your bot can do this in under 100 milliseconds, right? Or your automation tool can do this in under 100 milliseconds. And then once you've developed a bot, it's just a matter of plugging it in. Like my sound effect there. For customer journey, I kind of touched upon it already, but one of the simple steps that you can make there is making sure that when you are doing your data lookups, when you're trying to get an understanding of the state of the customer, pair that with their contact driver intents, right? There's nothing more valuable than being able to mine the results of the answer to the question, how may I help you? I mean, if you think, traditional customer service, you may have hundreds of different reasons that your customers might want to call you. Are you going to add all of those as IVR options? Probably not. Like, no one's going to listen to it. No one's going to remember all of these codes. It's incredibly cumbersome. I mean, that even goes down to, agent analytics. People relying on contact center agents to, log disposition codes at the end of the call. Again, I started my career in a contact center. I can't tell you how many times I'd look up a customer account and the last note, the disposition code was other. It's pretty easy to do that. You don't want to go through all those codes. As an agent, you're motivated to basically wrap up really quick and take the next call. So you're actually incentivized to take worse notes, right? So, and then of course being able to pair that data, and I'll show a little bit what that looks like, and of course at the interaction layer, implementing sequences and turns. Sorry, I know I'm probably going over time here. So this is an example of our top-level KPI dashboard that we build for all of our customers. The main three, so usually for us, it starts here looking at these metrics, and I'll go over them a little bit. There's some high-level ones, but this is about tracking effort and outcomes of interactions, so we're starting from the bottom up of the pyramid there. But at a high level, you may notice that containment's not there. There's no like I've denied people from talking to an agent, because that's not really a good outcome. But how we've worded that is helped but not escalated. Because the truth is, we could have helped them even if we did escalate. So if I just focused on containment, I might look at this dashboard, and if I go all the way to the far left, second column, where I talk about the three main outcomes, I would say, of the conversation, I might look at escalations and say we've escalated 60% of conversations and go, awesome, my containment rate is 40%, but it's not. My containment rate is technically 23%. Those are the people who I've helped that didn't need escalated. The other 16% just gave up. But again, if we're focused just on containment, goal achieved, right? But the next metric over, sort of the larger one where it goes to helped, this is where I'm talking about tracking customer journeys. In this case, though we've escalated 60% of calls, the bot has added value to 63% of calls by completing automations, by doing work for the agent, by making the agent's job easier, reducing the time that the agent is going to spend servicing the customer, therefore improving availability of agents and scaling the number of customers your existing team can handle. As far as pairing customer journey data with intent drivers, I might invite someone to you know what, I'm not going to do that, but I was going to play a little bit game of spot the problem here, because the moment we visualize, let's say, the state of a customer, you know, this is an example data that we pulled from a dashboard with permission, of course, for a debt collection agency. And so when we're talking about mapping the customer journey, if I start from the left side, we're saying, okay, as the debt company, how did I engage with the customer? Did I send them a letter? Was it a phone call? Did I send an enforcement agent to their house? Like, how did we inform the customer of this relationship that we now have with them, where we've acquired their debt from another company and we're here to collect, right? And based on that, when they reached out to us, when they spoke to our bot, was their debt open? Was it closed? What was the status of this debt? Was it without a payment plan? Was it with a payment plan? And of course, when I say spot the problem, I think you can see really clear. I mean, it may be very obvious to some, but if you look, those who are live, which in this case means there's no payment plan set up, the single biggest reason for calling is, how do I set up a payment plan? Now, we've gone here and we've automated that, and we can handle that and we can track it. So we can say, job done, right? No. I mean, I would imagine that we would probably save a considerable amount of resources and people's time if we probably informed them on how to set up a payment plan when we originally informed them of their debt. And this is where I'm talking about contact prevention. Why did they even need to reach out? Why do we have to force them to take their time, essentially, rather than equipping them to self-service and get what they need done from the get-go, right? So being able to visualize things in this capacity is very important. But I also want to point out, and it might be too small here, that the sixth one down for unknown, right? It's extremely important that you also keep track of fallbacks to the answer of, how may I help you? Because that's your gold mine for detecting emerging use cases. You know, there's an amazing story I like telling about the first voice bot that I built, where we noticed that, you know, every month we would get a spike of bad CSAT reviews online through web form submissions, and our customer service queues would get clogged. And so we're like, okay, what's going on here? Like, why? And through the unknowns, when we looked at the fallback report for the answer to that question, and we started running clustering, we noticed a weird pattern. People were saying, hey, you've ripped me off by $5 or $7, or my bill's $5 higher, or why is my bill $7 higher? And we're like, well, that's weird. We're not systematically ripping off people by $5 or $7. That's kind of strange. So what's going on here? And, you know, after working with customer service, after working with billing folks, I mean, this was a telecom company. So essentially we sold bundled products, you know, TV, internet, TV, phone, internet. And we sold in, you know, 2 or 3 year terms, and then we would offer a discount for the first year. So what was actually happening is we weren't letting them know that their bundled discount was expiring after the 1 year mark. And so each month when that batch of customers would roll over, they would get a bill that was higher without any notification, and that was, oh, you criminals, you know, terrible, the evil cable company, you know, trying to rip me off again. And so, you know, the solution to that one is not even, it's not sophisticated AI, it's not a bot, it's, hey, can we just, you know, send an SMS or an email saying, hey, by the way, thank you for being a loyal customer. You know, your first annual discount has expired, but if you renew with us today for another 3 years, we'll honor your discount for another year. Essentially turning what was a pain point into a revenue opportunity. When we talk about automations, we typically classify them in 3 categories. You know, we're talking about frequently asked questions, we're talking about tasks, we're talking about detections. You may have value in detecting things like vulnerability or detecting, you know, inability to pay or other facets. Each of these is quantifiable in terms of agent time saved, and that's your financial metric. That's, you could, depending on how you look at things today, if your measurement in terms of agent availability, do agent time saved. If your measurement is financial, turn that time saved as a ratio of cost per call and use that as the financial metric to essentially quantify the success of the results. Now we'll go through some brief examples. This might be more useful to share as a deck than to see on a screen, but this is kind of a sequence diagram illustrating those systems that we showed earlier and how we would accomplish this. So when we're talking about associating customer journey data with interaction drivers, we're talking about making webhooks. I think this is an example from Watson, if I'm looking at the left here. We're calling a webhook, we're looking up data from a CRM, and then of course we're funneling it into the analytics along with the state of the account and the utterance itself for why they were contacting. And of course, as we just saw, that gives us this wonderful picture that we can look at and zone in and find additional issues. Here's an example of how we would push, sequences and turns with interaction outcomes. Again, we're talking about context variables, another example for Watson. So at each step of a dialogue node, we're keeping track of what turn are we in, what sequence we're in. When we change sequences, we update those variables. And as we pass through the various phases of the conversation, we're constantly updating that in our analytics platform. And again, that not every platform will force you to do that. Again, systems like Dialogflow CX will allow you to automatically export interaction logs into BigQuery. And for any of you concerned about like PII and payment, in that scenario, for webhooks, get familiar with Spacey. I mean, there's absolutely commercial companies that can help you, but custom entities with a Spacey model are actually pretty great at stripping PII and payment info without that much effort. If you are using solutions like Dialogflow CX, they actually have their data loss prevention built right into their interaction logs, so you can set up those profiles and have the CX automatically screen all that information, so you're not actually keeping track of information that you shouldn't be. In terms of interaction, like what are we tracking, what outcomes or what things could happen on a turn that we need to pay attention to. This is what I like to call my dialogue butterfly. So for each turn of a conversation, whether it's small talk, whether it's repair, successful completion, or abandon, these are the outcomes that we track. And by being able to map those into sequences and turns, we can actually determine how well our interactions, our sequences and turns are performing themselves. So that enables us to do things like find out where people are dropping off, right? So I think that's abandoned, is that right? Yeah, where people are dropping off. What sequences are causing people to hang up the most? Or, what sequences are causing people to escalate? Like in this case, if you look at, it's very easy to get data on escalations from most platforms. Did I send the call to an agent or not? That's it, right? But why did I have to send the call to an agent? Right? Was it because something was wrong with the conversation? Was it because there was a system error? In this case, thankfully, we can see that the majority of the causes of people going to an agent are people saying that to the answer to the question, how may I help you? These are people that just do not want to talk to bots. There's a lot of them, and we're always going to have to deal with that. But being able to visualize that will help you contextualize and find where to focus to make sure that things are escalating when they need to, and things that are escalated due to problems are able to be addressed. And of course, I'm sure we've all used or seen analytics platforms that are able to give you intent confidence, and that's wonderful and that's great. But how do you know how your individual turns are performing or sequence? By adding these abstractions, you can also not just say, oh, well, this intent is confusing or that intent is confusing, but this allows you to get a better window into how confusing your copy is. Because based on a turn, what prompt did I give to the interlocutor or customer? How confused is the bot to the response to this prompt in general, right? And again, so why does this all matter? Again, going back to my original example there, most of the benefits that I've seen in my career with the bots that I've deployed have been on contact prevention and insights delivered rather than containment. Not to say that containment has not been realized, but in terms of the significance of impact or the degree of impact has been through gaining the new lens into the customer, which that on its own provides value. How are you going to look at this data? What tools are you going to use to monitor and improve the customer experience? For me, conversational AI has been, and well, the analytics behind it has been a lens that I haven't seen possible with other technologies, simply because they can't get that granular level of analysis for the reasons for call and pair that back to customer journey data so you can actually try and prevent people from reaching out. So thank you. Thank you for listening to me ramble after 5 p.m. I hope you all enjoy some networking and some drinks. And thanks for this guy for having me on the team.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Justin Randall.